First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be included in the microcredential units for Deakin. So a bit about myself. I'm Samuel Tseitkin. I am the co-founder and CEO of ExeQuantum, which is an Australian-based, a Melbourne-based company that specializes in post-quantum cryptography solutions. So essentially, as quantum computers continue their exponential development, they pose more and more of a threat to our current encryption systems. And therefore, governments all around the world have been setting deadlines, guidelines, and regulations around enforcing migration to post-quantum cryptography. That is a type of cryptography that can withstand quantum computers. ExeQuantum helps companies with that migration via providing advisory tools as well as products like our API-driven solution, as well as a QRNG and a few other things to make the migration as seamless and sustainable as possible. So with Cyberways, we are partnering up to deploy post-quantum cryptography solutions around the Middle East, while staying compliant with local regulations and measures. Essentially, when it comes to integration of post-quantum, the goal is to make it as seamless and non-disruptive as possible. So in terms of how it looks like to the end user, for example, it looks exactly the same. The changes of performance are minimal and by design. I guess the only one who will see the differences are people who, if they look at the keys or handle public keys, for example, these tend to be significantly larger than the ones that are generated by our current cryptographic systems. So they have to be ready to handle those larger keys, analyze larger keys, larger storage, maybe some compression techniques. Aside from that, there isn't really a significant difference in the flow for anyone except the cryptographers themselves and the tech team. Right, so it is kind of interesting. This is across multiple layers. There is, say, the location tracking. There is the actual application layer. There is a bunch of layers, different layers, and software, hardware that we need to actually look into when securing those systems. In the case of, again, as mentioned, all those systems are already in place. It's just that the underlying algorithm is no longer are now becoming obsolete in the face of quantum computers. So the goal is to kind of shift the algorithms without affecting anything else. The truth is that it is not really practical to do it because our current systems are quite hard-coded, essentially. It's kind of a lesson to learn for the future to handle the keys, the performance of the current algorithms. So what's been done at the moment is we actually add an additional layer, the post-quantum layer, in addition, in hybrid with the older systems, so that anytime there is any compatibility issues, there is a fallback to the classical algorithms as we slowly and gradually roll out the post-quantum. After that post-quantum layer has been fully established and the whole system is compliant and compatible, then there is the gradual rollout of the classical algorithms. However, because a lot of the partner companies, clients, etc., also have not yet adopted this type of cryptography, we're going to need to keep this classical fallback for the foreseeable future. So I guess you're kind of adding this extra layer of everything below, just using a different algorithm and handling the new key sizes. The underlying technology for digital identity documentation, like document signing, etc., is basically digital signatures. They have been an extremely powerful and versatile tool that has been used across everything. Blockchain is basically digital signature with some extra steps. So is identity confirmation. When you get, for example, that email from your Gmail and then you get this warning, the sender may have not been who they claim to be. It's because this email was digitally signed. However, the verification of that signature went wrong, which might imply that the sender is not who they say they are. Those digital signatures utilize the same algorithm that can be broken by quantum computers nowadays. So essentially, if a sufficiently powerful quantum computer develops, which it will, according to a lot of estimation between 2030 and 2035, people will actually be able to take those signatures that belong to someone else and then fake it as their own. And essentially what needs to be done is to switch those algorithms, those digital signatures, into a post-quantum. So the ones that have been used to actually switch is from RSA to MLDSA, which is a modular lattice-based digital signature algorithm that have been selected by NIST. Again, aside from the key sizes, the signature sizes, there isn't really a difference in the flow. For the end user, it looks exactly the same. And from my experience, those algorithms are also a bit more similar to our current digital signature algorithms in terms of implementation. Like the math behind them is very different. The actual implementation of Fed functions is basically the same. However, there is a lot more versatility because there are specialized digital signature algorithms. So you can actually play around with different post-quantum digital signature algorithm depending on your use case. There are faster ones, more secure ones, bigger keys, smaller keys, depending on your use case. So technically speaking, like there is no, we don't really know, like we don't have access to the users and how they use the cryptographic, well, especially not me, to the cryptographic algorithms and how they're being used. However, basically what happened is users can generate keys using the RSA algorithm, and now they actually have the option to use ML, at least I think it's still in deployment, but we have already deployed the algorithm for them. They can use MLDSA or MLChem instead to generate said keys. It would be the same scenario, essentially, for the signature, for example, if someone tried to, say, steal the public key that was sent over in order to actually encrypt the key as the secret key as it went from the front end to the back end or something like that. If it was tampered with, then the verification will fail. Again, bringing like a similar scenario to the email saying it may have not been from the right sender, except this time, instead of it being told to a user, it will be told to the program and knowing not to deny access to that user. So I guess that would be kind of a more simulated scenario. Especially now because quantum computers don't exist yet, so it's a bit more difficult to actually showcase. Essentially, it depends on compatibility. If it is compatible with post-quantum, then you actually use both at once for the time being, because those algorithms are new. So while they have been tested for, I think, around 8 years, since 2016 or 2017, until 2024, they have been thoroughly tested, vetted, broken, fixed, patched, and then finally selected, like three out of like dozens. So those algorithms are tested and known to be quantum secure as of now. However, they're still relatively new, and we don't know yet if they're going to be like any breakthroughs or additional vulnerabilities detected. So what's been done is essentially there is this algorithm called KDF, which is basically allowing you to generate a symmetric key based on like a sequence of data. And what you would do, RSA generates you the sequence of data now to create a secret key from using KDF, and that secret is not supposed to be revealed to anyone. As mentioned, it utilizes a classical algorithm to get the secret across to the other person to kind of reveal the secret for themselves, so that both sides have the same secret. It can be broken by a quantum computer. So we have this additional algorithm, MLChem in this case, that you generate the secret using both algorithms, send them over like encrypted, and then you can attach them together and do the KDF key inference from there. It's a bit tech heavy, but essentially you use both algorithms at once, unless the system is not compatible with the post-quantum, in which case sadly you only can use the classical. But then here technically now it's about liability. Like you can say, we have done our part, we have implemented post-quantum, the other side didn't, we had to continue communicating. It just kind of, it's kind of takes a bit of a mental exercise to understand Like if, for example, your credit card gets the details of the credit card get stolen, they're not going to change most likely within the say next 10 years. Maybe the expiry date will, but it's easier to brute force an expiry date than a whole credit card number. And that same thing goes for, like, say, well, in the case of passport data, for example, that's even longer. We don't want that information revealed at any point. And the thing is, when someone listens into a session, harvests a key, like the public key, and then harvests the data that's been done, that's been used, that's been encrypted by the key, it's essentially too late to protect the data. The data has been stolen, and now it's going to be broken into. A lot of people try to say there are multiple things at play in order to be able to comprehend and like realize that the threat is a lot closer than people think. One of the points that people have brought up is, well, quantum computers are really far away from being available to the average hacker. I don't need to worry about it because, like, I'm not a very large organization. I just I'm just your good old run-of-the-mill company. Well, the truth is, a random hacker does not need a quantum computer to do this. They can harvest your data and then, say, sell it to a malicious organization or country that does have a quantum computer. I'm kind of predicting that there'll be a black market of harvested data and then decryption as a service offered by countries or terrorist organizations who have the money and the power to have a quantum computer way before your average hacker need that. So the truth is, like, this type of technique is a lot more accessible to everyone, and it's definitely happening. It's not a question that it is happening. In terms of regulatory, there is some movement there. Like, in terms of regulatory movement, I do know that Gartner has already set a timeline that by 2029, all systems must be migrated to post-quantum cryptography, which is very close. They estimate that this is the time that quantum attacks will begin on classical encryption. That's not very far away at all. And the migration takes much longer than people like to think. We're talking about upending the entirety of the encryption system. So procrastinating is essentially disastrous. So that's why the Australian government, American government, and a few others have basically set a deadline for 2030 that after 2030, pre-quantum algorithms are no longer approved. They will basically not be supported anymore. They'll be deprecated. And then in 2035, they'll be outright banned, according to some. PCI DSS is a regulation that's around holding money. And I believe that it has been teasing recently that it's going to be enforcing post-quantum in the upcoming years. So it's not just a matter of staying secure, which of course is extremely important. Like, those regulations are happening for a reason. It's not like they're happening because they want to make life harder. At least the ones around encryption. Not sure about others. So, but these ones are there to essentially, and the reasons they are happening in the future rather than now is to give you time. That's actually an indication that it takes time, and this is your time now. If you're going to wait until the end, it's going to be way too late. So that's kind of what I've been saying. Well, first of all, it tells me that you've done your homework about my product, which is highly appreciated. Yes, we do have an API as one of the offering to allow easy encryption. When it comes to air-gap system and isolated systems, it's rarely actually viable. They sometimes don't have access to the internet. They only have access between each other. They definitely cannot access some remote API. This plan is mainly done for, like, smaller businesses who just need this integration on the software layer and just kind of be done with it. For air-gap systems, there are other approaches we can take. It depends heavily, or it becomes heavily customized at this point. I'm actually coming out a bit out of air-gap systems, just to kind of share some interesting stories, I guess. But when we talk about air-gap systems that don't have any access to the internet, we're going to have to just have the integration inside the device, at least as much as viable. There is no going around the difficulty of integrating it into the hardware, and then you need to be ready to update the hardware again. a potential fix that works as long as the device doesn't need to communicate with any new devices is a pre-shared key solution, where you actually just have that key integrated in on manufacturing and then just never change it. You never share it. You never that's used for symmetric encryption. It's the right, it works, it works. But ideally you have some sort of key rotation and able to actually change those keys around. As I mentioned, there is no really making it easy. Air gap systems are inherently difficult to secure. If we're going around out a bit for like maybe IoT devices who have access to the internet but are still lower level, there are some things that can be done. Especially with those new algorithms, actually, they are more computationally heavy than our current algorithms. I talked to some IoT companies who have mentioned that those new types of algorithms will just reduce longevity of their devices. It's going to actually make them last less time. It's going to make performance significantly harder. They are not built for post-quantum encryption. And a solution we actually came up with for them specifically is we have this cloud-based encryption algorithm runner where either there is a pre-shared key between the cloud and the device, or the device is able to run the post-quantum algorithm just to create a secure session between themselves and the cloud one time, and then they're able to just call to the cloud and get the key, run the algorithms and get the key that they need without having to run it locally many times, which will reduce longevity, destroy them, etc., etc. So they are like a kind of, it's kind of a more novel approach, I suppose, but like there are some things you can do to work around the problems of running the algorithms on a cloud while maintaining the benefits of doing that. I think in terms of languages, it doesn't really matter. The API can work with every language or layer or framework. That's kind of one of our edges. I would recommend learning the key encapsulation mechanism system. So the truth is, even speaking to a lot of cryptographers or cybersecurity experts who handle cryptography, when they hear the terms key encapsulation mechanism, they're not familiar with the term. And that's basically how the system of post-quantum cryptography works, and a lot of time in classical encryption as well. But essentially, the way that key encapsulation works is you send around the public key to then encapsulate a secret. We're talking about encapsulation. That encapsulated secret can go over the unsecured network because it's encapsulated by the public key, meaning encrypted, really. Going to the first party who then decapsulated with the private key, and now both sides have a shared secret. That's, I think, what I noticed people find the most challenging to comprehend. So just learn that. There's like some very nifty visual articles to do this, to kind of teach that. And even more so for the post-quantum, because it's actually working a little different to how the classical key encapsulation mechanism works. I think the name for the current key encapsulation mechanism is called Diffie-Hellman, which I also find very useful to learn. Even though it might be obsolete, it's still very useful to learn. And then the post-quantum algorithm is called MLChem, just to learn how to do the MLChem key encapsulation mechanism, how it works, and how it can be applied across different post-quantum algorithms. Well, actually, it's a pretty interesting question because it applies actually directly to my use cases. A lot of people kind of assume that the ones who only need to care about it or can benefit from it are, like you mentioned, healthcare, defense, finance. However, when it comes to my clientele, I have a fitness company, I have AI companies, and I have blockchain, which I guess is more expected, digital identity, and manufacturing, like construction, etc. Like some of those systems you wouldn't think about would need this type of encryption, like for example, fitness. But when you kind of dive deeper into it, they're talking about smart dumbbells, embedded devices that actually track people's biometrics and movements. Um, those are important to keep secret. Like you don't want people's vitals being exposed, or even worse, potentially tampered with to other people. Like, if you're talking about a very malicious case, maybe someone will intentionally hide, like, any sort of illness symptoms that are getting exposed to someone, that were supposed to be shown to someone through their equipment. Like they show they're all healthy, but it's actually not the case. Um, I guess, I'm kind of excited about how more versatile this post-quantum cryptography world is. For the last few decades, we've had only two algorithms really, elliptic curve and RSA. And they're somewhat similar to each other. I mean, they can be broken by the same quantum algorithm. But with post-quantum algorithms, they're all kind of different ones, as I mentioned, with different key sizes, different speeds, different security levels, giving us a lot more flexibility depending on different use cases, which is especially worthwhile to consider for, say, IoT devices who need, say, lighter algorithms, or blockchain who needs smaller key sizes. That's kind of, I think, an exciting, it's a new era of cryptography that I'm looking forward to see how it develops. I guess, we are talking about new concepts here, novel concepts, post-quantum cryptography, crypto agility, which, just to kind of explain a bit, crypto agility is the ability to switch between cryptographic algorithms very quickly. Because even though post-quantum algorithms that have been selected recently are considered to be quantum secure, we don't know if they're going to be broken in the upcoming years by a quantum or even a classical computer. And the fact is, even those new algorithms are already showing some cracks, some weaknesses, with some new algorithmic breakthrough with classical computing that have been managing to slowly kind of chip away at those algorithms. So that's why the term crypto agility comes now. You need to be agile. You need to be, when you implement those new algorithms, you need to be ready to do it over and over again. Not many people know how to do this, how to start. And I think that's because since this is a novel problem, it requires a novel solution. And it's very likely that they are missing that novel solution, if you will, a puzzle piece for the for cyber resilience, which is cryptographic agility. And with our approach, like the API-driven approach, we are emphasizing agility, being able to seamlessly switch between algorithms with minimal disruptions to flows, to infrastructure, etc. And so we start maybe if we can become, we can consider ourselves the missing puzzle piece for cyber resilience. And then I talked to ChatGPT. I told him about, the cool aesthetics that I'm looking for, and it came up with that. So, as mentioned, at our company recently, we have tried to hire a few people. We're looking for software engineers who are able to develop a product for one of our clients, as well as, of course, integrate our cryptography. We found plenty of people who can develop the product. We found, I think not a single person was able to actually implement the encryption or understand how it works. When we finally found the person, the amount of competitors, competitive recruiters that we had to fight with was very large. We had to give a pretty generous offer to actually be able to get him. And the thing is, it hasn't been relevant recently, until recently, because the cryptographic algorithms were already implemented and were there. Everyone was all handy dandy. But now with quantum computers coming to wreak havoc on everything, it's becoming significantly more in demand, because now we need to refurbish everything, we need to create everything, and it's not going to get back to what it was before. There are no more the days of one algorithm to rule them all. So it's going to be a longer term, high growth sector, I predict, that is going to only increase in demand, especially with AI attacks, with quantum attacks, with all kind of emerging technologies that are presenting more and more of a threat. So, as mentioned, that's why I'm trying my best to help mentor people, to teach people. I mean, you can delete it out if it's too promotional, but like we also like releasing a course as well around it as well, you know, and offering the API is like a way to learn how it all works. Doing my part. And of course, it's highly commendable that Deakin is doing it as well. Not many universities even know about this or like, care enough to actually even address it. So it's kudos. That's all I'm saying.